So basically, this is a misnomer that is a black fungus. Everywhere we are hearing it is a black fungus. But I would like to say that in medical terms, the cell wall does not have melanin, so it is not a black fungus. Mucorales do not belong to black fungus. Black fungi are Alternaria or Curvularia. Those are the black fungi. This typically, as you can see, these are the black spores which appear as a salt and pepper appearance in mucorales, but these are not black fungi. So moving on, this is a recent, just 2 days back, a compilation of 80 cases of COVID-associated mucormycosis in Lancet preprints. So a compilation from 18 countries was done. Definitely, India topped the list in this with 42 cases overall. Followed by USA, Pakistan, France, Iran, and Mexico. You can see the distribution here. And most commonly, if we see the risk factors, what are the risk factors? We all know neutropenia, hematopoietic stem cell transplants, or the solid organ transplants. These are predominantly associated with pulmonary mucormycosis. Diabetes, again, this is predominantly associated with rhino-orbitocerebral mucormycosis. Which is typically with facial pain, sinusitis, proptosis, there may be diplopia. Trauma, definitely trauma is important cause with cutaneous mucormycosis. And in countries like Asian countries like China and India, especially in immunocompetent individuals as well, without diabetes or any other immunocompromise, there may be renal mucormycosis. And there is flank pain, fever, hematuria with sterile urine, and blood cultures are also sterile. So that may be a renal mucormycosis. Again, in India, specifically with the diabetic population on dialysis or the malnourished children with broad spectrum antibiotic therapy, abdominal mucormycosis is also very common. So this is the general scenario with or without COVID. But why in COVID we are getting so many mucormycosis cases? Definitely, India is the diabetic capital of the world with millions of cases of diagnosed diabetes and more than that of the undiagnosed diabetes. Even those with uncontrolled diabetes, they think that they have their blood sugars are normal, and on the contrary, they are uncontrolled diabetes. The age at which diabetes sets in India is also very younger age. It is also associated with various other comorbidities. Now, in today's date, if we see, this is the latest yesterday's data on WHO website. So India is also the capital of COVID now. So definitely diabetic capital or COVID capital, we have to be a mucormycosis capital as well. But there are certain other factors also which are not only just diabetes or steroids, but certain other factors also which are increasing, which are increasing the risk of mucormycosis. One predominant factor that is often ignored is the raised ferritin. As we have seen that in COVID, there is raised inflammatory markers like IL-6, D-dimer, or CRP are raised. Along with that, ferritin is also predominantly raised in these patients. Now, iron is a source of nutrition for mucor. As compared to other fungi like Aspergillus or Candida, they don't need iron, but mucor needs iron for its growth, and there are various enzymes which help in absorption of this iron. So definitely when we have ferritin, a source of iron which is present, it is going to help in the growth of this fungi. The iron can be absorbed from the heme in diabetic ketoacidosis patients when there is acidosis. H+ ions are increased, the ferric ion is absorbed. Also with iron chelating agents like desferrioxamine, where iron is readily available for the fungus now for absorption and growth. So definitely it is an important risk factor along with diabetes and steroids. So in this study, what they have shown that amongst these 80 cases, predominantly 59 were rhino-orbital mucormycosis, 20 were pulmonary. Median age was in the 50s. Definitely there was a male predominance. India was having the highest number of both rhino-orbital and the pulmonary cases. Underlying risk factors was diabetes in 55 out of those 59 cases, and uncontrolled diabetes was seen in 46. So definitely it was a very high number. Other comorbidities were predominantly it was hypertension, some kidney disease, obesity, cardiac, or asthma were also associated with it. Specifically, diabetes was even more predominant risk factor in India because 95% versus 68% among the reported cases were from India. So definitely this was significantly higher as compared to the other countries. So COVID diagnosis, yes, COVID was diagnosed in prominently most of the cases at the time of admission. Mostly we are saying it is post-COVID phenomena, but no, even during the admission for COVID, mucormycosis was present in these patients. ICU admission was required in around 50% of the cases. Steroids were given predominantly in most of all these patients. Antifungal therapy which was given was liposomal amphotericin B. Other forms like conventional or the lipid complex amphotericin B were also given. Surgical interventions were done in almost 60% of the cases. I'll show the data later how significant it was. Systemic antifungals were also in more than 60% of the cases. There were fungal co-infections as well with aspergillosis predominantly. And outcome, again, there was around 50% mortality in the cases, and few patients also had life-changing comorbidities like loss of vision due to exenteration of the eye. So in these patients, over 18 countries, mucormycosis was diagnosed at a median of 10 days after the diagnosis of COVID-19. Okay, so it could range from 0 to 90 days, but on an average, it was 10 days. Patients who did not show any signs of mucormycosis at the outset, at the time of admission, it was slightly prolonged to around 15 days. Proven diagnosis of mucormycosis was based on histopathology or culture in predominantly in 78% of the cases, and in these cases radiology was positive only in 65% of the cases. So we cannot rely completely on radiology alone for the diagnosis of pulmonary mucormycosis. Probable pulmonary mucormycosis, again, probable is when we do not have a tissue diagnosis from the sterile tissue. Okay, it could be from the respiratory sample, but not from any other tissue samples. So radiological findings and a positive culture was seen predominantly in 82% of the cases. However, in these cases of pulmonary mucormycosis, if we do the nasal scraping, it was positive only in 17.6% of the cases. So mostly predominantly our mode of detection is the nasal scraping or the nasal secretions, which may not be positive in around 80% of the cases with pulmonary mucormycosis. They are useful for rhinocerebral, but for pulmonary mucormycosis, it's not a good sample. Mortality was definitely higher in the pulmonary, that is 81% as compared to the rhinoorbital mucormycosis. And mortality, again, in rhinoorbital, if there was confirmed involvement of CNS, mortality was still higher, significantly higher as compared to those who did not have any CNS involvement. When we think of mucormycosis, definitely amphotericin B or antifungals are the first thing that we think of, but definitely surgery is more important than antifungal therapy in case of rhinoorbital cerebral mucormycosis. So the mortality was higher in those who were treated with antifungals alone as compared to those who had surgery. Also surgery, but however, if there is CNS involvement, if there is disseminated mucormycosis, surgery will not have much of a role. So median survival time from the day of diagnosis was around 75 days for rhinoorbital cerebral. So it had a better prognosis as compared to just 9 days for pulmonary mucormycosis. So definitely pulmonary mucormycosis has a rapidly fatal course. Now, when and how to suspect COVID-associated mucormycosis. So the patient may be active COVID, he may be recovering, or he may be even post-discharge of the patient, he may be presenting with the symptoms. Initially with nasal blockade or congestion, nasal discharge, facial pain, numbness, swelling, the signs of sinusitis, headache or vital pain, toothache, there may be loosening of tooth, jaw involvement will be there, blurring of vision, diplopia, there may be some paresthesias or fever, skin lesions may be seen, eschars, especially on the palatal region can be seen. In case of pulmonary, again, this is very tricky for diagnosis because it will mimic COVID symptoms again. There will be fever, chest pain, worsening of the respiratory symptoms. On chest CT also, it will mimic the COVID type of picture. So it may be confusing. However, it has been seen that if there is a thick walled lung cavity with a reverse halo sign and multiple nodules associated with pleural effusion, they are more predictive of pulmonary mucormycosis. And again, then we have biomarkers, but for mucor, we don't have a specific biomarker as yet, but negative galactomannan or a negative beta-D-glucan repeatedly suggests with the presence of a clinical picture and a radiological picture of a fungal infection, it will predict it could be a pulmonary mucormycosis. So how will we diagnose? Basically, radio imaging is very important here for rhinoorbitis cerebral. An MRI PNS with brain contrast study is important. If you are suspecting pulmonary, it could be a plain CT thorax. Again, for rhinoorbitis cerebral, we have to have proper sample. Better if we get endoscopic guided sample of best sample important. One portion of it should go in normal saline for microscopy and culture. Remember this, most of the samples we receive are in formalin. So they are of not use because we cannot culture them, right? So one portion should be for microscopy and culture in normal saline. Other can go for an histopathology in formalin. For pulmonary, again, we need to have the radiological evidence with us, repeated biomarkers which are negative. Then we can have pulmonary samples like BAL or mini-BAL, or it could be a transbronchial biopsy, CT guided biopsy, again for microscopy and culture, as well as histopathology. Now here is the typical, as you can see, this is the KOH mount that we receive from the sample. When we do the KOH mount, we typically see this broad aseptate ribbon-like hyphae with 90-degree branching. So this is typical of the aseptate hyphae of mucormycosis. On culture, it will show a fluffy, cottony growth with a typical salt and pepper appearance. The growth of mucor is rapid within 1 or 2 days. And then these are the typical features on the culture that we see. Similarly, for histopathology also, we see those broad hyphae. But most of the times, in some cases, it may mimic aspergillosis as well. So culture is very important for diagnosis of mucormycosis. Radiological features, there are a variety of features. It could be a halo sign, or it could be a reverse halo sign, which reverse halo is predominantly associated with mucormycosis as compared to aspergillosis. And it may be multi-organ involvement, there may be the involvement of the vessels, and also a rapidly progressive course can be seen in pulmonary mucormycosis. Now, how will you treat it with COVID-associated mucormycosis? First and foremost is the control of the glycemia, the diabetes or the diabetic ketoacidosis of the patient is very, very important. This is the first line of therapy for mucormycosis. Secondly, if the patient is still on steroids after the prescribed dose as well, or prescribed duration as well, so we need to discontinue that rapidly. Other immunomodulating therapies are also being given rampantly in COVID, so those have to be monitored strictly. And if there is evidence of mucormycosis, we should stop these therapies. Then comes the role of surgical debridement, where extensive debridement has to be done at the earliest. Even if we have to sacrifice the eye, we have to do that. In case of pulmonary, if it is a localized disease, then we can go for surgical intervention. And then there is the role of medical therapy. Again, hydration of the patient is very important. Renal function is very important because we are going to give toxic drug to this patient. Liposomal amphotericin B is the drug of choice, is the first line therapy, and it is the preferred treatment at the dose of 5 mg per kg per day in 5% dextrose over 2 to 3 hour infusion. Remember, your slow escalation should not be done. We have to hit hard and we have to hit fast in these patients. Even if there is brain involvement, we can go up to 10 mg per kg. Other forms of amphotericin like amphotericin B deoxycholate or the lipid complex amphotericin B, they are not preferred. The evidence has shown that they are of low efficacy in these patients. So only if the cost is an issue or the availability of liposomal amphotericin B is an issue, then we can go for these forms of amphotericin B. We have to monitor the renal function and also the potassium levels in these patients. Those who are then, where comes the role of other drugs? Only in two situations where either it is a refractory mucormycosis, it's not responding to surgery or other modalities, and amphotericin, it's not responding, it is a refractory mucormycosis. Or secondly, the patient is intolerant to amphotericin B. In that case, we can go for alternatives like posaconazole and isavuconazole. Recently published guidelines, they have shown that for posaconazole, the delayed release or the infusions are better. And also isavuconazole is now a good drug, a recommended drug for mucormycosis. So we can have tablet posaconazole, 300 milligram twice a day on the first day, followed by 300 milligram once a day. We have to have monitoring of trough levels for posaconazole. For isavuconazole, again, it's a good drug, 200 milligram thrice a day for 2 days, followed by 200 milligram once a day. We have to monitor these patients regularly, radiologically, as well as microbiologically. And remember, the duration of therapy is very long. It has to be around 3 to 6 weeks of amphotericin B therapy, and then consolidation or switch over to oral posaconazole, isavuconazole for 3 to 6 months, depending upon the involvement of the body. So most importantly, how can we prevent the infection? So for prevention, again, first and foremost, poorly controlled diabetes. Now, it's not only a diagnosed diabetes or a pre-diabetic which may be the cause, because we know steroids, they also cause hyperglycemia. It could be steroid-induced diabetic state as well. And also 2 papers have been released recently which show that SARS-CoV-2 directly affects the islet cells of the pancreas, causing a diabetic-like state. So again, it is a attack from all the sides. So that has to be controlled. The diabetes has to be controlled. Steroids should be used only with patients with hypoxemia. These are the recommendations from the Fungal Infection Study Forum. And oral steroids are contraindicated with normal saturation, as we all know. If steroids are used, we have to have the blood sugar monitoring, because nowadays it's an over-counter medication for everyone who is thinking he's having COVID. So that has to be monitored. Awareness has to be there. Dose and duration of steroid should be limited, 0.1 milligram per kg per day for 5 to 10 days only. Again, universal masking is very important because the fungal spores are everywhere. So masking will help us a lot in preventing the disease. Such patients, COVID patients, should avoid visiting the construction sites or wherever there is seepage or more moldy growth, moldy atmosphere is there. So those such sites should be avoided. After discharge, the patient should be strictly monitoring his facial pain, nasal blockage, whether there is excessive discharge, loosening of teeth, chest pain, or respiratory insufficiency. They must immediately seek advice. However, there is a lot of misinformation regarding mucorales. As I've already mentioned, they're not black fungi. They're not contagious. That is very important. It is not going to spread from one person to another, because spores are everywhere. It is our own susceptibility, our own conditions, diabetic state or other immunosuppression, that is making us susceptible to the infection. So definitely it is not going to spread from one person to another. It does not spread by oxygenation, humidifier or water. The fungi remain in indoor and outdoor environment. So the spores enter by the respiratory tract. They will not go through the humidifier. I've recently seen this message just going viral, where they are saying that just put methylene blue in the humidifier and then it will prevent mucor. So this is very wrong practice. It should not be followed. No antifungal prophylaxis is recommended because the incidence is not more than 10% in the COVID-associated cohort. It's very important we don't give these patients unnecessary posaconazole or isavuconazole, because it may lead to breakthrough infections as well. Secondly, if we are suspecting aspergillus in these patients, because if the culture diagnosis is not yet confirmed, in that case, amphotericin will be better as compared to voriconazole, because voriconazole prophylaxis has shown to lead to breakthrough mucormycosis. Okay, so voriconazole also we use in culture media also to, where we are suspecting mucor. So to prevent the growth of other fungi, we are using voriconazole. So definitely voriconazole prophylaxis is going to lead to increased mucormycosis. So that should be avoided. If we talk of ILBS data, we had 2 cases, rather 3, but these are the 2 cases where one was ethanol-related CLD, decompensated with renal failure. Bilateral pneumonia was there, COVID pneumonia was there. He was diagnosed on 28. PCR was negative by 3rd. And he had predominantly type 2 diabetes, which was the comorbidity associated. Ferritin levels were high in this patient. However, by 8th, we received the culture on 6th or 7th, and 8th, we had the diagnosis growth of rhizomucor in this patient. But the patient succumbed to the illness on 8th itself. There was other patient who was also CLD ethanol related decompensated cirrhosis. In this patient, he had recovered from COVID. He was admitted initially here for 3 days. He was discharged because he was having a good saturation on room air, and then he was discharged. During his admission, he was on steroids. Comorbidities: he was a known case of membranoproliferative glomerulonephritis, for which he was given steroids for a prolonged duration of time. His ferritin levels were also quite high, and he presented post-COVID with the signs and symptoms of pansinusitis. He had continuous headache, localized temporal in the maxillary area. On radiography, pansinusitis with right middle turbinate invasion was seen. And on culture, initial culture showed the growth of rhizomucor. Again, KOH were negative. KOH can be negative in 60% of the cases. So rhizomucor was grown, and this patient was referred because he needed the debridement. So definitely we have to look out for these infections now in post-COVID era as well. So I've just made a small slide where in case of liver diseases, if we have COVID-19, diabetes is the most important risk factor. If the patient is diabetic, he is high risk. We have to monitor steroids, ferritin in this patient. Strict glycemic control, caution of steroids, monitor the ferritin, radiological and clinical monitoring associated with microbiological monitoring is very important. If non-diabetic, still we have to do glucose monitoring in these patients because there are associated factors. Steroid caution, monitor the ferritin levels, and again we have to have a radiological, microbiological and clinical monitoring of such patients. Thank you. So not only just mucormycosis, we have to look out for majority of the opportunistic infections now post-COVID. Thank you.